In this video, I am going to discuss the types of moral dilemmas.
There are several types of moral dilemmas. We'll just discuss some of which. Epistemic and ontological dilemmas, self-imposed and world-imposed dilemmas, obligation and prohibition dilemmas, single-agent and multi-person dilemmas. Epistemic moral dilemmas. In this situation, there are two or more moral requirements that conflict with each other. The moral agent hardly knows which one takes precedence over the other. In other words, the person involved here doesn't know which one is morally right or wrong. For instance, I want to honor my promise to my son in going home early. But along the way, I saw a sick old man who needs to be brought to the hospital immediately. Where does my actual duty lie? We know that there are two conflicting duties here, but we should have a fuller knowledge in each situation. Is an important purpose being served by my getting home early? How serious is the condition of the sick old man? However, one option must be better than the other, only it needs fuller knowledge of the situation. That's the term epistemic moral dilemma. Ontological moral dilemmas, on the other hand, is that there are two or more moral requirements that conflict with each other, yet neither of these conflicting moral requirements overrides each other. This is not to say that the person involved in this kind of dilemma doesn't know which one is morally right. The case is that neither of the moral requirements is stronger than the other. Hence, the moral agent can hardly choose between the conflicting moral requirements. For instance, a military doctor is attending to the needs of the wounded soldiers in the middle of the war. Unfortunately, two soldiers urgently need a blood transfusion. However, only one bag of blood is available at the moment. To whom shall the doctor administer the blood transfusion? Sure, we could not tell whether administering blood transfusion to military A is more morally right than administering blood transfusion to military B and vice versa. Let's move on to the next type of dilemma, self-imposed moral dilemma. It is caused by the moral agent's wrongdoings. Let's take a look at this situation. Ricardo is running for the position of town mayor. During the campaign period, he promised the indigenous people in his community to protect their virgin forest just to gain their vote. But at the same time, he seeks financial support from a mining corporation. Fortunately, he won the elections. Yet, he is faced with the dilemma of fulfilling his promise to the indigenous people to protect their virgin forest and at the same time allows the mining corporation to destroy their forests. Indeed, through his own actions, he created a situations in which impossible for him to fulfill both obligations. Hence the term self-imposed moral dilemma. World-imposed moral dilemma, on the other hand, means certain events in the world place the moral agent in a situation of moral conflict. William Styron, Sophie's Choice, is a classic example. Sophie Sawistowska has been asked to choose which of her two children, Eva or Jan, will be sent to the gas chamber in Auschwitz. An SS doctor, Fritz Gemann von Neumann, will grant a dispensation to only one of her children. If she does not choose which one should live, Dr. von Neumann will send both to their death. Sophie chooses her daughter Eva to go to the gas chamber. Her son Jan is sent to the children's camp. The third type of moral dilemmas, obligation and prohibition dilemmas. Obligation dilemmas, more than one feasible action is obligatory, while in prohibition dilemmas, all feasible actions are forbidden like Sophie's choice. Sartre's student is a classical example of obligation dilemma. Sartre uses the anecdote of a former student's moral dilemma during World War II to illustrate both the limits of making decisions based on a defined moral code and the erroneousness of blaming passions for people's actions. The French student's brother was killed in 1940 by the Germans, but his father nonetheless later abandoned the family to collaborate with the Germans. The student had to choose between staying in France with his mother, who found her only comfort in him, and leaving to fight with the Free French against the German occupation. After realizing he was caught between moral principles, family and nation, or the obligation to care for his mother and the obligation to avenge his brother's death, he came to Sartre for advice. The philosopher told his student that there was no correct or incorrect decision. Neither moral codes nor the strength of his affections for one or the other party could determine what to do. Rather, the student had to invent his own solution to the problem. Finally, single agent dilemma means the agent ought, all things considered, to do A, ought, all things considered, to do B, and she cannot do both A and B. In other words, the person involved here is compelled to act on two or more equally the same moral options, but she cannot choose both. For instance, a medical doctor found out that her patient has HIV. For sure, the medical doctor may experience tension between the legal requirement to report the case and the desire to respect confidentiality. Although the Medical Code of Ethics acknowledges our obligation to follow legal requirements and to intervene to protect the vulnerable. In multi-person dilemma, on the other hand, the situation is such that one agent, P1, ought to do A second agent, P2, ought to do B, and though each agent can do what he ought to do, it is not possible both for P1 to do A and P2 to do B. According to Benjamin Labastine, the multipurpose person does not, inasmuch as agents X, Y, and Z may possibly have chosen conflicting moral choices. That is, person X chooses A instead of B and C, and person Y chooses B instead of A and C, so on and so forth. The multi-person dilemma occurs in situations that involve several persons like a family, an organization, or a community who is expected to come up with consensual decision on a moral issue at hand. A family may be torn between choosing to terminate or prolong the life of a family member. An organization may have to choose between complying with the wage law but cutting its workforce or by retaining its current workforce by paying them below the required minimum wage. The multi-person dilemma requires more than choosing what is right. It entails that the persons involved reach a general consensus. In such a manner, the moral obligation to do what is right becomes more complicated. On the one hand, the integrity of the decision ought to be defended on moral grounds. On the other hand, the decision must also prevent the organization from breaking apart.